Hey everyone, welcome in. We're diving into a topic a lot of you have been asking about. Understanding a partner with BPD.
It's definitely a complex one, and we're going to go deep, looking at it from the partner's perspective.
Right, not diagnosing, but really getting into the experience. And the source we're using for this deep dive is BPD from the perspective of a partner. A deep dive into understanding, coping, and emotional resilience.
Great source. Lots to unpack there.
It is, and one thing that really hit me was this idea of the relationship feeling like an unpredictable landscape, you know?
Yeah, I can see that really captures that sense of emotional volatility that's often present.
And how that impacts the partner, right? Like they're always walking on eggshells, not knowing what might set things off.
Exactly, and that goes back to the core challenge of BPD, emotional dysregulation. Even small things can trigger really big reactions.
The source uses that phrase a lot, walking on eggshells. It's like this constant tension, never feeling quite safe.
Right, and I think it's important to emphasize here, this isn't about your partner intentionally trying to manipulate you.
That's so key. It's not a game to them.
Not at all. Their emotional responses are very real, even if the trigger seems small or insignificant to you.
It's like their emotional volume is just turned way up.
Exactly. It's like that all the time. So even a whisper can feel like a shout.
And the source had this analogy I found helpful, like having a super sensitive gas pedal in a car.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah, even a light tap can send you lurching forward, right?
Makes you afraid to touch it at all, almost. And just like learning to drive a car with a touchy gas pedal takes practice.
So does navigating these intense emotions in a relationship.
Exactly.
Which I think leads us to that fear of abandonment that comes up a lot with BPD.
Big one, yeah.
Because it's easy to see those constant needs for reassurance as clingy or controlling even.
Sure, on the surface, maybe.
But when you picture that sensitive gas pedal,
it's a whole different story, isn't it? Suddenly, it's not about trying to control you.
it's about avoiding that emotional crash of feeling abandoned.
And that fear is real for them, incredibly intense.
The source even shared an example. I won't get into details to protect privacy, but it was about this partner who'd asked for reassurance constantly.
Multiple times a day, even.
And it wasn't coming from a place of manipulation. It was pure fear of being left.
That's the thing. Understanding the why behind the behavior changes everything.
Allows you to be more compassionate, even when it's tough.
Exactly. Compassion is key because it can be really, really hard.
It makes me think about how the source talks about setting boundaries, which is so important, but
It's so tricky in this context, right?
yeah, because how do you balance supporting your partner with protecting yourself? Where's the line?
It's a tough one. The source talks about the difference between supportive and enabling, and I think that's so important to tease apart here.
Okay, yeah, let's dig into that. What's the difference, especially in this context of, like, fear of abandonment?
So supportive behaviors, those are things that help your partner build their own coping skills, like, teaching someone to fish instead of giving them a fish.
Empowering them, yeah.
Exactly. Enabling, though, even if you're coming from a good place, it can actually make those negative patterns worse.
So, like, with the reassurance thing, how would those two look different?
Okay, so say your partner's constantly needing to hear you're not going to leave. A supportive approach might be, hey, I hear you're feeling scared right now, validating that feeling.
Acknowledging it, yeah.
But then you gently guide them to a coping skill you've worked on together, maybe deep breathing, journaling, something like that.
You're not just instantly making that fear go away for them.
Right, because enabling that would be like every time they get anxious, you just tell them what they need to hear to calm down, which, going back to that car metaphor,
Oh, right.
it's like you're constantly slamming on the brakes for them anytime they get nervous about the gas pedal.
Instead of teaching them how to drive. Wow, see, that's why I love having you here, because that clicked in a way I hadn't even seen.
It's about finding that balance, being there for them, but also they got to learn to drive their own car, so to speak.
And as the partner, you can't be the only one in the driver's seat the whole time. Which makes me think about how the source talks about seeking support.
Huge. And not just for the person with BPD, but for the partner, too.
It's so easy to feel alone in this, like nobody gets it.
Right, and you're dealing with so much. That's where therapy can be so helpful individually, as a couple.
Even support groups, the source mentioned NAMI.
All of that provides tools not just for your partner to manage their emotions, but for the relationship itself.
And to be honest, just having that space to process your own stuff.
Oh, 100%. Partners of people with BPD, they often experience what's called compassion fatigue.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's exhausting.
It is. You're constantly giving, empathizing, validating. It's like You have nothing left.
Emotionally bankrupt. The source used that term, and man, it hit hard.
Because that's what it is. Like, you've been running a marathon with no end in sight.
So how do you even start to refill that cup? What can partners do? The source mentioned mindfulness, breathing exercises.
Those are great for emotional regulation, which is key for both people. You're more grounded, better able to handle the tough stuff.
It's not just about being calmer, it's about creating stability.
Exactly. But self-care goes beyond that too. Setting boundaries, making time for things you enjoy.
The source even said, like, schedule it in if you have to. 15 minutes a day of something you love, no matter what.
Because you can't pour from an empty cup, you know? And that's not selfish. It's essential.
It's like the oxygen mask on the airplane. You got to help yourself first.
Exactly. And therapy can be a big part of that journey, finding ways to meet your own needs, even in the middle of all this.
Because it's so easy to lose yourself.
Right.
And trying to manage everything else.
Absolutely. And when you're constantly being told you're either the best or the worst, no in between.
That splitting the source talked about.
Yeah, it really messes with your sense of self. But you got to remember, their perception of you, it's distorted by the BPD.
Doesn't mean it's true.
Not at all. It's like looking in a funhouse mirror, you know? Therapy can help you see yourself more clearly again.
Reconnect with who you are outside of this relationship.
And that's crucial because you're still in there. It's a journey, not a quick fix, but it's possible.
And I think something important to remember from the source is that people with BPD can also be incredibly empathetic.
Oh, absolutely. That's the thing. It's like they feel everything so intensely. Their own emotions, but also other people's.
So it's not all bad, right? There's good mixed in with the hard stuff.
For sure. And that empathy, it can be really beautiful when it's channeled in a healthy way. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's not hopeless.
Yeah.
But communication, that's going to be huge too. The source talked about that a lot.
Oh, yeah. Setting those ground rules for arguments, especially.
Because otherwise, explosion.
Pretty much. So it's about creating that safe space to actually talk.
Okay, so what does that look like, practically speaking?
Like agreeing on a timeout signal if things get too heated. Or we're going to use I statements, no blaming. The source even said some couples have a code word.
A code word. I like that.
Yeah.
Kind of resets things like, whoa, okay.
Exactly. Hit the pause button before it becomes a blow up.
Because tone matters too, right? Not just what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. Body language, all of it. That's another place therapy is so useful. Like you're learning to communicate differently.
With that BPD lens in mind.
Yeah, it's its own language almost. But for the partner, something the source really highlighted was it's easy to internalize all that.
Oh, 100%. Like, if you're constantly being told you're either the best or the absolute worst.
Your sense of self takes a beating.
It's that splitting thing again, right?
Exactly. And it makes you start to question your own worth. But it's crucial to remember their perception of you. It's distorted.
By the BPD. So not actually you.
Right. Like looking in a funhouse mirror. Therapy can help you see yourself more clearly again. Remember who you are outside of all this.
Get back to your own reflection, not the warped one. It's a journey, like you said. Takes time.
It does, but it's possible. And you know, going back to something we touched on earlier, that empathy thing, it cuts both ways.
Oh, right. With BPD, they could be super empathetic.
Yeah, it's like they feel everything so intensely. Theirs, yours, it's all amplified.
So that can make it even harder to set boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Because you feel so much of what they're feeling.
Absolutely. It's a real balancing act.
Mm-hmm.
But that empathy, it's also the potential for incredible connection.
There's good in there with all the tough stuff.
Yeah, and that's something to hold on to. This isn't an easy road, but it's not hopeless. There's support out there, ways to make it work.
Well, on that note, I think that's a good place to wrap up this deep dive. For anyone listening who's relating to this, feeling overwhelmed.
You're not alone. And there is hope.
BPD is treatable, relationships can grow, and you deserve support too. Take care of yourselves, everybody.